Between 1983 and 2000, before the times of peace, there were 3 wars waged on the Vortex. This was the time of the ascended Roseroud's leadership. After being summoned to the Vortex, Roseroud built what is now our organization's headquarters on the Vortex property. After initial negotiations with the Vortex faltered, Roseroud waged her first war. We aim to provide the first official documentation of the happenings and reasonings of these wars, including the infamous Third War on the Vortex, often called the True War. It is important to note that we have been at peace with the Vortex for 24 years. While we will provide coverage of our old wars, the focus of this account will be on this longer-lasting time of peace. The ascended Roseroud spent her first day living on the Vortex property in February of 1983. For the first month, she lived alone, observing and communicating with the Vortex. She kept sacred diaries of these days. These were the days she willfully put herself under the spell of the Vortex. These were her goofy days. In the presence of spiritual vortexes, many will feel elated, happy, silly, or goofy. This is a deceptive tactic of the Vortex. Roseroud, however, was merely leading the Vortex on. After 1 month of her goofy days, she would begin negotiations with the Vortex. But first, she would need to ascend the Vortex. The goofy days and the dewy grass on the Vortex property made it clear that the Vortex was in an active state of mass haunting. Roseroud ceased her goofy days and began collecting every drop of dew on the property in order to infuse it into a defense potion in preparation for the potential dire event of spiritual warfare. In order to begin negotiations with a spiritual vortex, one must first ascend the vortex. In order to ascend a spiritual vortex, one must first pinpoint its core. To locate a vortex core is a delicate and difficult task only achievable by the most powerful of spiritualists. Luckily, Roseroud was the greatest psychic medium to ever live. In April of 1983, Roseroud began mapping the vortex. To aid her in this immense task, she was joined by fellow psychic medium Donna Heshley and spiritual healer Turgo Tapid. The results of the mapping project revealed the scope of their enemy, a core measuring no more than 30 yards and rising over a mile into the sky. Once the core was pinpointed, Roseroud began her work and made multiple attempts to ascend the vortex to begin negotiations. She failed in her first 5 attempts. Donna Heshley and Turgo Tapid were Roseroud's primary allies in these early days, and they both had very different views. One of Roseroud's early mentors, Donna Heshley, felt peace must be pursued. The young and fiery Turgo Tapid, however, felt war must be immediately declared on the vortex. The disagreement would lead to the fracturing of Roseroud and Donna Heshley's relationship, as Roseroud would eventually side with Turgo Tapid and declare war. After 5 failed attempts, there was growing concern amongst the trio that ascension would not be possible. It was, of course, the 6th effort that worked. A veil was placed around the core and wrapped around Roseroud. She sat in the center of the core for 5 hours and 21 minutes on May 2nd, 1983, and then she ascended. She was the first person ever recorded achieving ascension of a spiritual vortex. She returned from ascension 36 minutes later. Rose Roud would never divulge details of her ascension, saying it was part of her agreement with the vortex. She would ascend an undisclosed number of times in that month of May. These were the first negotiations with the vortex. The return of Hefferton was a significant occurrence. A year prior, Rose Roud sent her soldier Hefferton on a journey to assemble a team. Turgo Tapid drove Hefferton and his team of 8 assembled psychic warriors from the airport to the vortex property. These were the initial 8. En route, Turgo warned Hefferton Rose Roud was not pleased with his return. She had just achieved her first ascension of the vortex, and she saw Hefferton's returning as a disturbing disruption, and she questioned what he had been up to in his travels. Upon seeing Hefferton and meeting his initial 8, Rose Roud quickly determined that they were not up to task. She sent them into the vortex property to locate the gnome. Hefferton, meanwhile, was angry with Rose Roud for embarrassing him in front of the initial 8. She had called him mean things, and this had hurt his feelings. Hefferton, despite being a skilled empath, was also in fact a drunken, gambling addict. He will not be portrayed positively in this accounting of events. The initial 8 were weak. They all gave up on their task of locating the gnome within a single day. Rose Roud had to punish Hefferton for wasting her time. She sent him into the vortex property to locate the gnome himself. Hefferton was more skilled than the initial 8, and he found the gnome quickly. The infamous story of Hefferton and the gnome is a long story and will be dealt with in a later video series. Please limit questions about this incident and other gnome incidents until it is properly addressed. We understand there is curiosity and anger toward our perceived secrecy regarding our gnomes, but we assure this is only for the purpose of public safety. Hefferton's next task would be to do what he had been originally asked to do: assemble a team. After the failure of the initial 8 came the Wondrous 5. One of the Wondrous 5 was named Garner Garrison. His role in the events of the vortex would be transformative. While the Wondrous 5 laid defensive potion around the property, it would be the Californian psychic from Canada named Garner Garrison who disobeyed Rose Roud's orders and walked into the vortex core. Garner Garrison ascended the vortex. But unlike Rose Roud, he did not return after negotiations. He was held there, suspended in the air. During the time of Garner Garrison being suspended half a mile in the air, 3 of the remaining Wondrous 4 and Hefferton called on Rose Roud to cease negotiations and declare war on the vortex immediately. Rose Roud, infuriated with both Garner Garrison and the vortex for mocking her, had Hefferton shoot Garner Garrison to death in the air. His body remained suspended in the air for another week before it splattered to the ground. The date of the splattering was July 5th, 1983. The first war on the vortex had begun. As the sky turned pink on July 5th, 1983, Rose Roud walked into her meditation chambers and pressed a white button and thus activated her primary apparatus of spiritual warfare, the keradisk. The keradisk was developed by Rose Roud and her longtime lover in the early 70s. While other tools are necessary for a keradisk to operate, for now, we will focus specifically on the keradisk device. Hefferton and the Wondrous 4 positioned the keradisk to point away from the vortex core. They applied defensive potion around the property. Meanwhile, Rose Roud sat in her commander base. Her meditation chamber was a place of great power. She soaked in her buke and radiated attack energies. She aimed to assure the vortex would be sorry it had challenged the ascended Rose Roud.
I have lost the ear of Rose. I had her ear, and now it belongs to Turgo, that slimy wench. I loathe her to my core. A line forms outside Turgo's tent every evening. She heals individually, then she proceeds into the living area for group healing. I tire of Turgo. I resent her healing and feel she is instead performing spells on me. I've spoken this to Rose, but alas, I have lost her ear. This war is not necessary. Turgo, now that she has Rose's ear, she eggs her on. She says, more war. I say less. I say cease. The Vortex does not want war, it wants communication. We are communicators with the spiritual realm. We are not warriors, but Turgo sees herself a warrior. She, the healer. The medic is our grand champion of war. What an irony. I rage so much lately, and I don't know if it's the Vortex or Turgo ensnaring me. I keep these journals so I am not forgotten or misrepresented by those around me. I rage so much. I used to matter around here. I used to matter to her. Now she levitates above us all, above me. She claims to be the greatest psychic medium to ever live. Well, I taught her much. The ascended Rose scares me. She no longer allows us to look into her eyeballs, for she has grown too powerful in these times of war. I miss looking into her eyeballs. I yearn to look into her eyeballs again. There. I said it. I am not a fool. I am Donna Heshley, and I will have the ear of my commander once more. The date is July 19th, 1983. The time is 7:41 at night. Fucking wench.
On August 10th, 1983, the greatest battle of the First War commenced, the 31-hour battle. Rose Roud awoke at dawn and assembled her team in the living area. It was the first time they had seen her since the war began. They were all ordered to avoid eye contact during this meeting. It has been said, but never confirmed, that Rose Roud was over 11 feet tall during this rousing address to her soldiers. She made it clear, the time to attack was now. They would engage in the tactic of shock and awe. She commanded her army to surround the Vortex Core. They engaged in direct spiritual warfare for 31 hours. During the battle, the soldiers worked in shifts. All but one, Bishop Garrison, the empath and twin brother of deceased Garner Garrison, did not take a single break. He stood by the Vortex Core absorbing and projecting energies for all 31 hours. Prior to this, Bishop Garrison had been considered a joke. He was not taken seriously by any of the other wondrous four. They mocked him behind his back for effeminately weeping about his dead twin brother, and Rose Roud commented often that she wished it had been Bishop Garrison who died instead of his brother. Following the 31-hour battle, Rose Roud declared the Vortex greatly weakened and the shock and awe endeavor a success. She then proclaimed Bishop Garrison to be her new second-in-command, shockingly choosing him over Donna Heshley and Turgo Tapid. Rose Roud shunned all but Bishop Garrison for the remaining month of August. She met privately with Bishop Garrison every day, and she allowed him to look into her eyeballs. As intense resentments over the promotion and special treatment of Bishop Garrison began to grow, the counterattack of the Vortex loomed.
I'm better than them. So much better than them. They mock me. I spend so much time with her now. She lets me in, she lets me see. I know more than them, and they are furious about this. I miss my brother, but I also know his death was fate. I know it led me to her. I believe she's going to give me this Vortex. I believe she's going to teach me to ascend. The Vortex is weakening. The headaches are less intense. The grass is less dewy. The Vortex sees me standing next to the ascended Rose, and it is scared. The Vortex saw what I did during the battle. It sees me as a warrior, a manly and tough, muscled warrior who rarely cries. Hefferton the fat man and Turgo the twat are plotting against me. They meet every night. I see them and the device they work on. It's called a FESHP or something. They claim it a game changer. I, Bishop Garrison, I am the game changer of this war. The others don't let me sit with them during supper time. The Ascended Rose doesn't allow anyone to witness her eating during wartime. I believe it is because she is shy about the ectoplasmic goo she leaks from her eyes. But I would never judge her. So I eat alone. All alone. I eat my gravy and beans alone, and no one else can have them. They eat their special foods. I hope they choke on them. But I also do not care. Because they are beneath me. They are beneath myself and my eternal commander and my new best friend, the Ascended Rose. The date is August 29th, 1983. The time is 3:36 in the morning.
That morning, everyone woke to a mood of exuberance. The spiritualists, who had been angry with one another and engaged in conflict, decided to frolic giddily together on the fields. They did funny walks and made silly voices to one another. There was joy in the air, and there was no dew in the grass. No one had a headache. The war was clearly over, said Bishop Garrison. Rose Rout agreed. Thus, the first war was declared mission accomplished. Victory would be celebrated. If Rose Rout had not been weakened by her valiant war efforts, she would see the obvious, that the Vortex was playing a trick on her. The Vortex would engage in a months-long period of deceptive peace. Similar to the Goofy Days, this would be a period of pure joy. Unlike the Goofy Days, however, the deceptive peace was not a trick being played by Rose Rout. She had actually been fooled by the Vortex. Turgot Tappet warned Rose Rout immediately. She was being misled by her enemy and her new so-called ally, Bishop Garrison. One night, the spiritualists got naked and danced by the fire. They showed each other their silly walks and funny voices. The Vortex watched their derangement from the distance, gaining strength and preparing for the Second War. On December 16th, it would strike them with a ferocious and shocking blow. It was everywhere. It bubbled from the grass. It dripped from trees. On the morning of December 16th, 1983, the deceptive peace came to a startling close, and the Second War began. Ectoplasmic goo was the artillery of choice for this grand attack by the Vortex. The spiritualists spent the following week cleaning and collecting the ectoplasmic goo, which made them all gravely ill. A great dispute occurred over what to do with the goo. Some wanted it to be burned. Some wanted it to be dumped in the lake. It was Turgot Tappet, however, that demanded the goo be preserved in a special buplin. Rose Rout, feeling that preserving the goo would be too dangerous, decided to burn the goo during a ritual. Some have suggested that this burning of the goo was a false flag event, and that the real ectoplasmic goo was preserved in a secret buplin deep in the woods. These rumors have never been verified and are considered conspiratorial. The Second War lasted a mere 19 days. All of Rose Rout's spiritualists lay incapacitated by the Vortex. Bishop Garrison spent the entire Second War hiding like a coward, weeping inside of a bathroom tub on the property. It was Rose Rout alone who defeated the Vortex and won the Second War. Some of the only records from this period of 19 days are from Rose Rout's personal journals. These journals would not be understandable by a non-ascended person and will not be shared. In summary, they made one thing clear. Rose Rout alone stunningly defeated the Vortex, weakening it to a point that it no longer swirled and could no longer inflict its spells. she defeated the Vortex herself alone, with the help of absolutely no one else. The ascended Rose Roud won the Second War on the Vortex. On January 3, 1984, Rose Roud pushed the button to deactivate the keradisk. Thus began the Ascended Era. 13 years where the spiritualists maintained what they assumed to be complete control over the Vortex. Rose Roud, tremendously weakened from her fight with the Vortex, began what is referred to as the Great Ignoring. She was so disgusted and disappointed by her pathetic army that she refused to speak to them for the remainder of the decade. Her only contact with her soldiers was to frequently appear in their dreams, where she would sternly stare at them from a far distance.